All right, everyone, now it's time to actually criticize Donald Trump. Of course, when you have somebody in office, if you're not a total desperate partisan, you have to do that from time to time. If the Democrats were to come out tomorrow or whatever and say, we're going to ban bump stocks and people should be 21 to own a gun and we're going to have universal background checks and by the way, we're going to punish people for having mild, like seasonal depression or something. They can't own a gun because reasons. If they were to do that, a lot of people would come out and criticize them that are notably silent on Donald Trump because they're like, well, yeah, it's not as bad. Trump comes out and says the Democrats want to abolish your Second Amendment, gets a rousing boo from, the CPAC crowd. That's true. They've been trying to do that for a long time. You look at California or some of these blue states. The Democrats on the national level always claim they just want a little bit more gun control, and that's it forever. Don't worry. But they've already made that argument before, number one. And number two, if you look at states where they're in complete control, they have persistently passed gun control well above and beyond what they're telling us they want on a national level. So that's bullshit. The Democrats are lying. They do actually want to denigrate the Second Amendment to the point where it basically becomes vestigial. Notice that they don't want to do this to other amendments. This one amendment is bad. It's wrong. It's like that meme that they have where they say, well, our founders fought with a weapon that fired 2 bullets per minute. Obviously, the times have changed and we need to change the way we do gun laws and stuff. Okay, yeah, well, those old fountain pens where you dip it in the ink, write a few lines, have to dip it again. Yeah, they're less efficient than a Bic. Certainly less efficient than, using a laptop and publishing something online. That doesn't mean that we need to ban assault pens and go back to fountain pens. Because that's just moronic. It doesn't make sense. Yeah, the founders never envisioned there being 50 states either. So what? States' rights are out the window. The 10th Amendment, we're not caught up with that because the founders didn't expect there to be this many states. We need more federal law, obviously. There's a big problem. Abolish the 10th. Oh, right to privacy. The founders never envisioned that your mail would be sent by plane and truck. They had people on horses, or they took them manually from person to person. The postman would go to the other side of the village to deliver it as a service, basically, for tuppence. So therefore, right to privacy goes out the window because times have changed. It's not the way the Constitution works, thankfully. But let's not be hypocrites here, those of us who support the Second Amendment. It's true, Trump is absolutely right what he's saying, but he's trying to do the same thing. He is saying we're going to have universal background checks. Okay, well, as far as person-to-person sales, like, a neighbor is selling his old shotgun to his other neighbor, what's he supposed to do? File a bunch of legal paperwork? That's essentially what you're suggesting. It doesn't make any sense. And by the way, if you have universal background checks, but you don't do that, then universal background checks are useless. There are so many guns in circulation, they'll just become more costly. Ultimately, more will actually end up being manufactured because people stock up beforehand. A lot of people buying bump stocks right now, I'm sure. You're saying we'll ban bump stocks, but that's not a weapon. It's just a modification. Other people are saying, oh yeah, well, you don't even need the bump stock per se. You can modify it in other ways to make it do the same thing. Then what's the point? There is none. I'm hearing some person saying, oh, put a piece of string on your finger ultimately and it'll work the same. Now, that would be an interesting feat, but I'm sure it probably can be done. I don't know. I don't own an AR-15. Yeah. Of course, if the Democrats get into control, you never will be able to unless you buy it on the black market. Better get them now, I suppose, because they're constantly trying to harangue and convince people. Just one more little bit of gun control. Just one more, and that's all forever. And then within a couple years, the next time there's a mass casualty event, oh, just a little more. Look, the last bit we passed that we swore up and down was common sense gun reform is no longer common sense gun reform. Just a little more. They'll keep doing that until you end up like the UK and you need a permit. You need to show ID to get a butter knife. That is what will happen. That is the end goal of their attacks on the right of self-defense. Thankfully, most states stand against this bullshit, and most courts do too, Ninth Circuit aside. I think even they have sporadically stood in the way of gun restrictions. Trump says we're going to add mental illness to the universal background checks. Again, that's the shittiest possible way. That's worse than saying you want to ban an assault rifle. You're doing that across the board. Here you're trying to take a very large class of people and arbitrarily determine which parts of that category that is, again, are ultimately an arbitrary construct, which different subcategories are going to be actually checked for. Depression, paranoia, schizophrenia, manic depressive, postpartum, suicidal ideation. There are so many different potential disorders. They don't affect people the same way. And legally speaking, the threshold constitutionally, I believe in multiple states, is that the person has to be a criminal lunatic. So they have to be ideating criminal tendencies. They have to be incapable of functioning normally, like someone who is so out there that they're incapable of living their own life. They need the help of other people in order to simply function. Otherwise, they would die, essentially. They can't obtain their food, they can't work, they can't really do anything. They're not necessarily a vegetable, but they're crazy. They're a lunatic. There's a big difference between a person being incapable of functioning and a person occasionally falling into a funky mood and having some seasonal affective. So where do you exactly draw the line? And you know it'll be misused. Let's say, gun-friendly folks out there. Let's say you trust Trump and you're like, well, yeah, but ultimately the number of disorders on there will basically be just lunacy. People who are really, really, crazy. We would call them crazy. Not people with mild depression, not people who have maybe a little anger management issue. People that are significantly way out there mentally. Okay, that's fine. You can make that point. I disagree, but you can make it. What about when the Democrats inevitably are back in power at some point in the future, which they will be? It's more like it's not really a pendulum within U.S. politics, but it's closer to that than just an arrow that goes in one direction forever. At some point, the Democrats, or even maybe an anti-gun Republican, maybe someone who's tempered like a Kasich, will get into power over time. And they will attempt to misuse that background system. They'll try to add more to it. You've just given the government carte blanche to arbitrarily determine any particular mental status at all fulfills that requirement of cannot buy a gun because cannot pass a background check. And by the way, it won't cut down on crime. If the person is actually intending to use the gun for criminal purpose, they will skirt that law and buy it locally from another individual in their neighborhood. They'll put an ad out on Craigslist or whatever. You can't regulate it all. It's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. There are so many weapons out there that aren't registered anywhere. They're too old to be registered. What the fuck are you supposed to do about it? So I would say Trump is completely wrong on all of these counts. A bump stock's not a weapon. Universal background checks, good on paper. Everyone talks a big game about it, but it'll never actually do anything as far as crime goes. It'll just inconvenience people who are doing private sales. Will it even include stuff like bullets? Will it even include accessories? Who knows? Mental illness, it's a crazy idea. What you're saying is that you're going to punish people when no crime has actually been committed. That's unconstitutional. Two of the different counts of things that he's suggesting here are unconstitutional, and the third is just dumb. So what's the fucking point of it? And if Trump were a Democrat saying the same thing, I would see nonstop outrage from a lot of the people that are notably, they're responding in a humdrum fashion. They're like, yeah, well, maybe I disagree. This part's a little screwy, but that's okay. And Trump can get it done. No, that's not what you're supposed to do. You're turning into a partisan. Don't do that. Look, most of Trump's fans aren't partisan anyway. A lot of them are expat blue Union Democrats. Union Democrats or people who are sort of the margins of libertarianism or something. Like you're supposed to have some loyalty to Trump because he's the president. No, you have loyalty to country. He's attempting to denigrate the Second Amendment of the United States. I stand against it. And I get flack from it too. Like some people are like, oh, you want dead kids. Or, a lot of people just downvote the video, but they can't argue against the point because they know that he's sounding like a Democrat or like a liberal, I should say. So they just won't say anything at all. They'll just downvote the video itself, which is even funnier. It's like, come on. You know I'm right. If you've ever fired a firearm, if you know anything about guns at all, you know that what the Democrats have been saying is dumb. And Trump is just echoing them. It's just Democrat light rhetoric minus the assault rifle ban. That's all it is. Oh, universal background checks. Again, great on paper. Even the NRA on paper endorses it. But every single time they attach other bullcrap to the same bill and it doesn't pass. And that's what'll happen here, by the way. There'll be Democrats that probably vote against it because it'll include other draconian bullcrap measures. They'll say, we're going to have a tax on firearms and we're going to levy 100% of its value you have to pay to Uncle Sam to own the firearm. Or you have to pay every year to keep owning it. We have to make sure that it's, licensed and everything's, above board and kosher on paper. No, it's crazy talk. And it's not going to happen, by the way. Pissing off an enormous proportion of the GOP partisan base, as well as people who aren't GOP partisans. Some of them are even Democrats, but there's sporting enthusiasts or whatever, pissing those people off. by proposing legislation that violates the Constitution and won't even work is a bad idea. It's one of the stupidest things that Trump has actually done, to tell the truth. It's not, this time, it's not 4D chess. I think it's more reactive, I think, that other Republicans begged him to do this so it wouldn't become a midterm issue. I'm hoping that that means that he himself doesn't even have strong feelings on the issue and realizes that, hey, it probably won't pass. If it did, it wouldn't do anything. And it's basically just a throwaway. That would be wonderful. Unfortunately, though, when it comes to denigrating the Second Amendment or any other part of the Constitution, you can't remain silent even if you think it's 4D chess. Because the 4D chess relies upon a public reaction too, by the way. So people who oppose it need to speak out against it. It's part of his A/B testing tendencies. That's about all. Peace out.